Fresh strikes in the Middle East are once again threatening peace talks to end the 3-month war and testing the already tenuous truce. A U.S. official tells MS Now the military carried out new strikes in Iran yesterday, shooting down 4 Iranian attack drones and targeting a ground control station in a port city along the Strait of Hormuz. The official added both the drones and ground facility posed a threat to the key waterway, saying, quote, "These actions were measured, purely defensive, and intended to maintain the ceasefire." That word defensive is important, and the reasoning that the U.S. has provided in the past, too. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, meanwhile, said early today that it retaliated against the latest round of U.S. strikes, claiming to have targeted the American military base from which they were launched, although it didn't say where the U.S. base was or how it had been targeted. The IRGC also warned its response to future attacks would be more decisive, in their words. At the same time, Kuwait's army said its air defenses were intercepting hostile missile and drone attacks, although it did not state the origin of those attacks. It all came up in a cabinet meeting yesterday as President Trump defended his handling of the war in Iran, dismissing concerns about any political fallout ahead of the midterms. The president also openly threatened U.S. ally Oman over entering into any agreement with Iran on sharing control of the Strait of Hormuz. Watch.
Their whole economic system is broken down. They thought they were going to outweight me. You know, we'll outweight him. He's got the midterms. I don't care about the midterms. Look what happened last night. That was the prelude to the midterms. People understand it. They know that, very simple, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I'm doing that for the world. I'm not doing it just for us. Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be. We will be either that or we'll have to just finish the job. But their Navy is gone, as I've said 1,000 times. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Everything's gone, and they're negotiating on fumes. But we'll see what happens. Maybe we have to go back and finish it. Maybe we don't.
President, Iran wants control of the Strait of Hormuz. Would you accept a short-term deal that allows Iran and Oman to control the strait? And would they have to open it immediately, or would you be open to that happening over a period of time?
No, the strait's going to be open to everybody.
And who would control it?
It's international waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up. They understand that. They'll be fine.
Joining me here on set, White House reporter for Politico, Alex Gangitano. Alex, first of all, Oman, key strategic ally in the region. The fact that the president is threatening them, I think, is notable, and yet it sort of speaks to the confusion of even where these negotiations are, because it felt over the weekend like the White House was talking about a deal that at least had some pretty broad contours outlined in it. They faced a lot of outcry from Republican senators and officials, and now it seems like Trump is just kind of reopening the whole thing against the backdrop of more strikes going off and people saying, well, the ceasefire's still in place. Those were defensive. Can you help us square these circles a little bit?
Right. It does feel like the talks on Saturday, which felt like progress. It felt like we were going to get something out of the White House in terms of a deal or at least a pathway to a deal, were all kind of erased by his comments yesterday. I mean, the question over whether Iran can team up with Oman, one of our allies, to control the strait, he shut that down, saying we'll bomb them just like anybody else, or blow them up just like anybody else. Those are really firm words against a U.S. ally, as you said. And he also is so hell-bent on saying, you know, we don't want to control the strait. No one should control the strait, but we want to oversee the strait. And I think terms like that are where the negotiations getting held up, because they're looking at control, but walking it back into an oversee process. And Iran is looking at, no, we want to control this. Maybe let's try to team up with an ally to soften the blow to the U.S., but that's something that it seems like the White House is not willing to take. So at this point, it looks like, yes, the ceasefire is holding because these are defense strikes. As you said, that's one of the key words they're using here. But you know, where we are in negotiations seems really up in the air at this point.
But it also sort of strains credulity of watching strikes happen, of U.S. officials calling them defensive, but Iran continuing to promise retribution if and as they continue. I think that's the backdrop when you look at the state of play on the ground. And then you look at the way that the president is talking about it through a political lens as well, which has never been divorced from the foreign policy here. Right. And the fact that he looked at primary elections that happened on Tuesday in places like Texas as a sign that he is not facing any negative blowback for his Iran position. I mean, it doesn't make sense because the person he endorsed in a primary won, and I think that that was always what it was going to look like. But the comments, I think, belie a concern within the White House about how this is going to manifest in the midterms. Right.
He goes back and forth of saying, I don't care about the midterms. Oil prices can be high and people will thank me at the end of the day. To also, this is a example of how people are liking what I'm doing in Iran. And it is, using Texas as an example, that was a challenger who took down an incumbent, Senator John Cornyn. And yes, that challenger was endorsed by President Trump at the end of the day. But what he's really doing is making these Republicans in Congress lives very difficult because they have to answer for this war in Iran that wasn't their idea, that they never got to vote on, that they never had to have a say on. And it was all the president's decision. And some of them are defending it. Some of them aren't. They're stepping in when they want to. And they're weighing when they go out on the campaign trail how much they can talk to the American public about this, how much they want to answer questions, how much they want to have the president's back. It's a really hard gamble for them right now. And of course, we saw, two prominent incumbents already go down, Senator John Cornyn and Senator Cassidy. And that's because the president wanted to see his own allies in the Senate.
And I also think that it's just important that in primaries, it would be a big problem for the White House if their aligned candidates weren't winning. Right. But it shows the power that remains within the Trump MAGA brand in a primary. But polls show in a general election that brand tends to lag. The Cook Political Report has done, some interesting work detailing how that might play out in the midterms. And it brings us to the general election portion in some of these key marquee races, including in Texas. So let's stay there for a second, because Democratic Senate candidate James Tallarico of Texas is now saying he regrets some of his past comments on transgender issues, because he was asked about them yesterday in an interview with CBS. Watch.
In 2021, in a speech during debate over transgender issues, you said God is non-binary. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think I was being intentionally provocative with that statement. But what it means is that God can't be defined by human categories. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, says that in Christ there is neither male nor female. I'm always going to stand up for Texans who are being picked on by the most powerful, most corrupt politicians in the country. There are some statements that I've made that I certainly regret. There are statements that I've made where I've missed the mark. I'll be the first to admit that. But Ken Paxton is intentionally clipping my cringy comments to distract from his career of corruption. Ken Paxton has a criminal record. I have a legislative record.
So this feels like an attempt by Republicans in Texas to sort of do a 2024 redux of something that largely was said to have worked for them. This idea of the Kamala Harris ad of she's for they, them was one that was particularly salient in the Lone Star State. But what do you make of the fact that right out of the gate, Ken Paxton, an embattled and scandal-ridden candidate who even Republicans have to quietly delete their own tweets about in order to pivot to the general election, is coming out basically with an argument about masculinity and Tallarico? I mean, what does that say?
Right. I think it first says how much on the defensive Republicans are feeling right now, because they're targeting Tallarico on the issue of masculinity, on broad issues of things that he said in the past that, yes, were confusing to some Republicans in the state of Texas. But that's really what that's what they have against Tallarico. It shows how close they feel that Paxton is to Tallarico in the polls. I mean, if you look at the aggregate of polling, Tallarico's ahead or they're neck and neck. So they're on the defensive here going into it. They knew months ago that if Paxton won this primary against Cornyn, that they would be behind trying to catch up on Tallarico. So I think their argument shows they are trying to catch up. They're trying to figure out how to appeal to Republicans in Texas, especially male voters, maybe that are offended by Paxton's personal issues. They're trying to say, why don't you be offended by this Democrat, too, on just things that he has said? My big takeaway, though, on how this is going to work in Texas from talking to donors all day yesterday was this is going to be a very, very expensive race. And it's an expensive race that Republicans didn't want to spend on. They want to be spending in North Carolina. They want to be spending in Michigan, in Iowa, wherever else. And now they're looking at at Texas as an issue for them because they have to raise a lot of money in order to beat Tallarico.
The primary itself, over $100 million were spent, and tens of millions of those dollars were negative ads on the airwaves in Texas against Ken Paxton, in part by some Republican leadership organizations that now have to turn around and support Paxton. You had John Thune yesterday basically speaking to that fact, saying, yeah, you know, I recognize and understand that we were backing John Cornyn. He is our colleague here in the Senate, but we are now fully behind Ken Paxton. Life comes at you fast in politics. It's a good reminder. White House reporter for Politico, Alex Angitano, great to see you. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Allie.